It is 2:58 in the afternoon. You are not tired the way you are tired at midnight. This is a different animal. Your eyes are open, but the sentence on your screen has gone blurry around the edges, and you read the same line 3 times, and none of it lands. Your hand drifts toward your coffee cup out of pure habit and finds it empty. And some part of you already knew it would be, because this is the second trip that hand has made today. Sleep. You tell yourself, or lunch, or just getting older. You have a whole drawer of explanations ready for this moment, because it visits often enough that you have learned to expect it. Here is the strange part. This crash does not check your sleep log first. People who got a full 8 hours still get flattened by it. People who skipped lunch entirely still get flattened by it. It shows up in 25-year-olds and 55-year-olds. On good days and forgettable ones. Almost on a schedule. Somewhere between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. So what if none of your usual explanations are the real one? What if the actual cause has been sitting quietly, literally, in a place you have never once thought to check? Not your heart, not your brain. A small muscle buried deep in your lower leg that has been almost completely shut off since around 8:15 this morning. And nobody ever told you it existed. Let's give your usual explanations a fair trial before we throw any of them out. Sleep is always the first one people reach for. And it deserves that spot. Your brain runs on glucose. And when you are short on sleep, your body gets measurably worse at handling that glucose the next day. Researchers have shown this again and again. So sleep is real. Nobody is arguing otherwise. But the crash does not spare good sleepers. Track a room full of people getting a genuine 7 to 8 hours a night. And plenty of them still hit the same wall in the early afternoon. If sleep debt explained the whole thing, well-rested people should walk away clean. They do not. Caffeine withdrawal is suspect number 2. And it gets thrown around online constantly. The theory goes that your morning coffee starts wearing off, and your body feels the dip as the caffeine clears out. Caffeine does have a half-life of around 5 hours. So on paper, this sounds reasonable. Except the timing rarely lines up. Coffee at 7 in the morning should not be causing a crash at 3 in the afternoon if withdrawal is the real mechanism. And people running on 0 caffeine all day. None. Report the exact same afternoon dip. Something else is steering this. Suspect number 3 is the one most doctors would actually take seriously first. And it is the strongest of the group. It is called the postprandial dip. The drop in energy that follows a meal. Especially a carb-heavy lunch. You eat. Blood sugar climbs. Insulin comes in to manage it. And if that swing is big enough, you end up groggy on the other side. This one is real and it is measurable. But here is the detail nobody accounts for. 2 co-workers order the identical sandwich. Same bread. Same chips. Same soda. One of them is foggy by 2:30. The other barely notices anything and stays sharp until 5. Same meal. Same sugar. 2 completely different afternoons. Age is the suspect people bring in last. Usually once nothing else fits. Insulin sensitivity does tend to decline with age. And that part is not myth. But walk into any office full of 25-year-olds and you will hear this exact complaint at this exact hour. Word for word. Age might make the pattern worse down the road. It cannot be the root of it. And there is a 5th suspect worth naming honestly. One that actually holds up under scrutiny. Your body runs on a circadian rhythm. And alertness naturally dips in the early afternoon for almost everyone. Sleep or no sleep. Lunch or no lunch. That part is genuine biology. Not an excuse. But a gentle, natural dip and a full mental shutdown are not the same event. A circadian dip explains why you might feel slightly less sharp at 3 o'clock. It does not explain why one person feels a mild lull while the person at the next desk feels like someone unplugged them. 4 suspects with partial alibis, and one honest biological fact that still cannot cover the whole story on its own. Something is missing. Some variable that has been running quietly in the background for 6 or 7 hours before that crash ever lands. Something that changes how your body handles everything else on this list. Before we go looking for it, I want to be straight with you about where this is heading. I'm not going to tell you that a single muscle controls your lifespan, or that fixing it adds 10 years to your life. Biology rarely hands out answers that clean. What I am going to show you is a real, published mechanism that shapes how your body processes energy every single day. And once you see it, the quiet way aging speeds up in people who never notice what is happening under their own desk will make a lot more sense. Look at your actual day for a second. Not the version you tell someone at a dinner party. You sit for breakfast. You sit for the commute. You sit at your desk. You sit through meetings. You sit for lunch. You sit for the drive home. You sit for dinner and a few hours of television before bed. Add it up honestly, and a lot of working Americans land somewhere close to 10 or more hours of sitting on a normal weekday. Sometimes well beyond that. The American Heart Association has tracked this for years, and their research keeps landing on the same conclusion. Higher amounts of sedentary time are tied to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and early death, independent of other factors. Their public guidance is refreshingly simple. Sit less. Move more. Not a complicated slogan. Just a direct admission that the sheer amount of time your body spends still is doing something to you. On its own. Separate from whether you also exercise. That last part is where a lot of people get tripped up. Because most of us have made peace with sitting all day by telling ourselves the workout already covered it. 45 minutes on the treadmill this morning. So the rest of the day is handled. Right. Researchers who study this pattern call it the active couch potato problem. You can be someone who exercises consistently and is still, biologically, sedentary for the overwhelming majority of your waking hours. Studies on this exact pattern have found that a single bout of exercise, even a strong one, does not fully undo the metabolic effects of sitting still for the remaining 9 or 10 hours. Your morning workout and your afternoon slump are not actually arguing with each other. They can both be true on the same day. To see why, you have to stop thinking of muscle as just a tool for lifting things. Muscle tissue is one of the largest metabolically active organs you own. When it contracts, even gently, it is not simply moving your leg. It is pulling glucose out of your bloodstream. It is burning fat for fuel. It is running a quiet chemical operation that touches your blood sugar, your insulin, and your energy. All day. Whether you are paying attention or not. When a muscle goes still for hours, it does not just stop moving. It stops doing that chemical work. The glucose that would have been pulled in and burned just lingers in your blood instead. Waiting. Your pancreas has to work harder to manage it. Your fat cells end up storing more of what your muscles would have used. None of this shows up as pain. None of it shows up on a scale that same day. It shows up slowly, as fatigue, as full, as a body that starts to feel a little heavier than it used to. We did not evolve for this. For most of human history, the body ran on near constant low-level movement. Walking, standing, carrying, crouching. Long stretches of total stillness were rare and usually reserved for sleep, sitting upright for 8 straight hours. Broken up by one intense burst of exercise, is a modern invention with no precedent in our biology. Muscles have no memory of that pattern, and they respond to it exactly the way you'd expect. They go quiet. So a real culprit is starting to take shape. And it is not the tired headline you have probably already heard. Sitting is the new smoking. That framing is lazy and it misses the actual mechanism. The real story is smaller and more specific. When your muscles go quiet for hours, one particular muscle, one almost nobody has heard of, goes completely dark, and it turns out to be doing far more work than its size would ever suggest. Its name is the soleus, and if that word means nothing to you, that is exactly the point. It sits deep in your lower leg, tucked underneath the bigger calf muscle, the one that gives your calf its visible shape when you flex it. The soleus is the quiet one underneath. You cannot really see it from the outside. Nobody flexes it in a mirror. It has no nickname, no dedicated workout day, and most people could not point to it if you asked them to. But structurally, it is strange and a little remarkable. Most muscles in your body are built for power, short bursts of force, the kind you need to sprint or hoist a heavy box. The soleus was built for the opposite job. It is packed with an unusually high share of slow twitch fibers, the endurance type rather than the explosive type. It is threaded with dense capillary networks, and it is loaded with mitochondria, the tiny structures inside cells that produce energy through oxidative metabolism. Your soleus was never meant to lift something heavy for 5 seconds. It was built to work quietly for hours, the way a pilot light stays lit inside a furnace, doing something useful without ever asking for credit. For most of human history, its main job was postural, keeping you upright while standing, absorbing shock while walking, working almost continuously during the long hours our ancestors spent on their feet. In 2022, a research team led by Dr. Mark Hamilton at the University of Houston published a study in the journal iScience that changed how scientists talk about this muscle. They found that when the soleus is activated in one very specific, low-effort way, even while a person stays seated, it can sustain an unusually high rate of oxidative metabolism for hours at a stretch. And in their research, this pattern was linked to meaningfully better regulation of blood sugar and fat over the course of the day. They named the movement the soleus push-up. And here is where I want to slow down, because if you picture the wrong thing, none of this will work for you later. Most people hear calf muscle and exercise in the same sentence and picture calf raises. Standing up, rising onto the toes, lowering back down. That is a fine exercise. But it is not this. The soleus push-up is done seated. The front of your foot stays planted on the floor the entire time, and it is your heel that lifts, rising up off the ground and then lowering back down. Slow and steady. Over and over. It is subtle enough to do under a desk during a meeting without anyone noticing. And it does not exhaust you the way standing calf raises would, because it is not asking for strength. It is asking for something your body almost never gets anymore. Sustained. Low grade. Repeated signal. Hour after hour. The strangest part of this whole discovery is how little it asks of you. This muscle does not need motivation. It does not need intensity. It does not even need you to stand up. It only needs to stop being ignored. For most of us, it has been ignored for years. Think about a typical desk morning from around 8 until noon, while you move through emails and calls. Your soleus has been sitting there doing almost nothing, not contracting, not pulling glucose out of your blood, not burning anything, effectively asleep while the rest of you is wide awake and working. This is the missing variable from Chapter 1. 2 coworkers eat the same sandwich, but one of them spent the morning with a soleus quietly working in the background, and the other spent the morning with a soleus that never turned on. Their bodies are not starting from the same place when lunch lands, even though the plate in front of them looked identical. I want to be honest about the size of this claim before we go further. This is not a miracle muscle. It will not replace sleep, a decent diet, or real exercise. And no single study should be treated like gospel. What the research does point to is a genuinely underappreciated piece of your body's daily energy system. One that modern life has quietly switched off. And one that seems to matter more than its size would suggest. Follow what actually happens after a meal. Because this is where the soleus stops being trivia and starts being the reason for your afternoon. Lunch is over. Within minutes, the carbohydrates on that plate are breaking down into glucose and pouring into your bloodstream. Your pancreas notices the rise and releases insulin, a hormone whose entire job is to knock on the door of your cells and say, "Glucose is here. Let it in." Skeletal muscle is one of the largest destinations for that glucose in your whole body, especially in the hour or two right after a meal. When muscle is actively contracting, even gently, it pulls glucose in aggressively, partly through the normal insulin pathway and partly through a separate pathway that switches on directly from muscle contraction itself. No insulin required. That second pathway matters a lot, because it means an active muscle can clear glucose from your blood even when insulin is not working as efficiently as it should. Now picture the two mornings from Chapter 3 side by side. In one, the soleus has been quietly active for hours. In the other, it has been sitting completely dark since the moment its owner sat down at the desk. Lunch lands in the first body, and there is an eager, active tissue standing by, ready to pull that glucose in almost immediately. The rise is smaller, it resolves faster, and the pancreas barely has to raise its voice. Lunch lands in the second body, and the tissue that would normally handle a large share of that glucose has closed for business. The sugar has fewer places to go, so it drifts in the bloodstream longer. The pancreas compensates by pushing out more insulin to force the issue. Blood sugar climbs higher and takes longer to come back down. And that longer, higher climb, followed by the inevitable crash as insulin finally catches up, is very often what an afternoon crash actually feels like from the inside. Not sleepy in the way midnight is sleepy. A specific fogged, slightly irritable heaviness that tends to show up almost exactly when a glucose swing would be expected to resolve. This is not a story that ends after one afternoon either. Repeat that pattern. Glucose running higher than it needs to. Insulin working overtime, day after day. And over time, in people who are already prone to it, you start building conditions for something bigger than a slump. Chronically elevated insulin has been linked to increased fat storage, particularly the visceral kind that gathers around your organs rather than just under the skin. And that fat is not inert. It releases inflammatory signals into the bloodstream, contributing to something researchers now call inflammaging, a slow, low-grade, chronic inflammation that appears to speed up several processes tied to aging. None of this happens in a vacuum, and it would be dishonest to pretend a quiet calf muscle is the sole author of it. Diet, genetics, total activity, sleep, and stress all carry real weight in this story too. What the soleus represents is one of the most overlooked levers inside that system. A lever sitting directly under your desk, doing nothing. For most of a typical American workday, stretch this pattern across years instead of days, and you start to see how something as unremarkable as an idle calf muscle can quietly nudge a body toward handling energy less efficiently over time. Which is exactly where the word aging in this story actually earns its place. There is a moment a lot of people eventually have, usually sometime in their 40s or 50s. Sometimes earlier, you stand up from a chair, and for just a second, your body feels heavier than you expected. Nothing hurts. Nothing is technically wrong. It is just there. A small negotiation with gravity that did not used to exist. The stairs at work start feeling a touch longer than they used to. Walking quickly across a parking lot in the heat leaves you a little more winded than it should. None of it is dramatic enough to mention to a doctor. There is no diagnosis attached to any of it. It is just the quiet sense that your body has started running a little differently than it did 10 years ago. There is an actual medical term for a lot of what sits behind this feeling. Sarcopenia. The Cleveland Clinic describes it plainly. The gradual loss of muscle mass, strength, and function that comes with age, raising the risk of falls, fractures, and loss of independence. It is not a disease you catch. It is a slow drift, often starting earlier than people assume, sometimes as early as your 30s, and it tends to pick up speed with each passing decade if nothing steps in. This is where the soleus rejoins the story, because muscle tissue that sits unused does not just wait there neutrally. Tissue that spends most of its waking hours completely inactive misses out on the kind of repeated, low-level signaling that appears to help keep it healthy over time. And here is where the loop closes, and it is worth sitting with, because it explains something that pure willpower advice never quite reaches. A body that handles glucose and fat less efficiently tends to feel more tired, more foggy, less inclined to move. A person who feels that way tends to move less across the day, not more. Moving less means even less signal reaching muscles like the soleus, which accelerates the very decline that caused the fatigue in the first place. It is not a straight line down. It is a loop, quietly feeding itself, one unremarkable afternoon at a time. This is part of why researchers who study aging increasingly look past a person's birth certificate toward a handful of functional measurements instead. Walking speed, sometimes called gait speed, keeps showing up in research as a surprisingly strong predictor of long-term health outcomes in older adults. The ability to stand up from a chair without pushing off with your hands is another one clinicians actually check for. The ability to climb a flight of stairs without stopping to catch your breath is another. None of these are exotic lab numbers. They are the exact everyday moments most of us do not notice. Right up until the day we do. I want to be precise here again, because this is exactly the point where it would be easy to slide into scare tactics. And that is not the goal. Nobody serious is claiming that one quiet calf muscle decides whether you live to 70 or 90. That claim would not survive 5 minutes with an actual researcher. What the evidence supports is something more grounded, and honestly more useful. Aging is not simply a countdown that started on your birthday. A meaningful part of how old your body feels, how it moves, how it recovers, is shaped by the signals it receives, or fails to receive, every single day. Muscle that goes quiet for years is one of those missing signals. And the soleus, small and unglamorous as it is, happens to be one of the clearest windows we have into exactly how much that quiet costs over time. None of what comes next needs a gym membership, a supplement, or a total overhaul of your life. That is genuinely the point. This muscle responds to small, repeated, low-effort signals. So the fix looks nothing like a workout plan. Start with the movement from Hamilton's research itself. Sit with your feet flat on the floor and your knees bent. Keep the front of your foot planted exactly where it is. Slowly raise your heel as high as it comfortably goes. Then let it lower back down. The front of the foot never moves. The heel does all the work. You can do this at your desk, in a meeting, on a flight, in front of the television. It is not meant to build strength or burn a noticeable number of calories in the moment. It is meant to keep that slow twitch. Mitochondria, rich tissue quietly online for as many hours of your sedentary day as possible. Next, break up long stretches of stillness on purpose. You do not need a dramatic movement break. Standing up and walking for 2 or 3 minutes every 30 to 45 minutes appears to matter on its own. And this lines up directly with the American Heart Association's own advice. Sit less. Move more. Not exercise hard once and call the day covered. A short walk to refill your water. A lap around the office. Even standing during a phone call. All of it counts toward the same goal. Pay particular attention to the window right after a meal. A 10-minute walk after lunch or dinner puts active, contracting muscle directly in the path of that post-meal glucose rise, right when your body needs somewhere to send it. This is one of the simplest, best supported habits in this entire conversation. And it costs nothing and requires no equipment. Build in resistance training 2 or 3 times a week if your schedule allows it, with real attention on your legs, not just the muscles you can see in a mirror. Strength training remains one of the most well-established tools we have against the slow drift of sarcopenia, and it works alongside everything else here rather than replacing it. Keep an eye on protein throughout the day too. Not just at dinner. Muscle tissue needs a steady supply of amino acids to maintain and repair itself. And spreading that intake across your meals tends to support the process better than loading it all into one sitting. One honest note before you turn any of this into a routine. If you live with diabetes, neuropathy, vascular disease, a recent surgery, or pain when you move your feet, treat everything in this video as general education, not medical advice, and talk to a clinician before making it a habit. None of this is a hack, and none of it promises to add years to your life or reverse a number on a chart. What it actually offers is smaller and, in its own way, more honest. A body that receives small, consistent signals throughout the day tends to handle energy differently than a body that goes quiet for 10 hours and then asks for one heroic burst of effort to make up for it. So picture that same afternoon one more time. 2:58. The same desk. The same slightly too bright office lighting. Except this time, underneath that desk, a small muscle you never used to think about has been quietly working since 8 in the morning. Not dramatically, not enough to notice, just enough to change what happens the moment lunch finally arrives in your bloodstream. Your body was never waiting for one perfect workout or one radical transformation. It was waiting for something much smaller than that. A signal, repeated often enough, for long enough, to remind it what it was actually built to do.